Welcome to episode 21 of Last Turn. So, Evan and I are here to tell you a little bit about Knights of the Frozen Throne now that it's over. Evan, are you going to miss it?
Yes, that was very exciting. Like everyone died, you know. That's generally what you want. It became very Shakespearean all of a sudden. But there's no denying the Death Knight cards had a huge impact.
Yeah, they did, surprisingly, which is nice.
Maybe some and not every card made a huge impact, but necessarily that can't happen. But there were definitely a bunch of excellent, excellent things that came out of Knights of the Frozen Throne. Not to mention a really great solo campaign, hilarious, I think.
Yep, yeah, the solo campaign for Knights of the Frozen Throne was really awesome. It didn't disappoint at all. I thought that a lot of the voice lines and stuff were really funny, and also it was pretty challenging. I mean, there's some of it I still didn't beat. I still haven't beaten Lich King with everybody yet.
Yeah, I'm in the pleb train with you. I don't have Arthas either.
Right.
And even beating him the first time was non trivial.
Yeah,
But
totally.
yeah, his dialogue is outrageous.
Yeah, it's very funny.
I was really happy with their willingness to just break the fourth wall and engage with how the players treat the game.
Yeah, totally. They do a good job. I mean, Blizzard's usually pretty on point with their humor, and this game is like exceptionally lighthearted. So
Mhm.
they tend to, we know that they tend to hit when they go for being funny.
Yeah, that behavior, I guess, that willingness to engage with players like that, I guess, is really foreign to me from playing Final Fantasy XI for such a long time.
I mean, but a lot of games don't do it in this way. A lot of games aren't
Yeah,
trying to break the fourth wall and be humorous about card games or their game in general.
he references the metagame. Like you could probably
Right.
count on one hand how many games do that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and he talks about like the legend ladder. He says the word metagame. I know that when he's like introducing Professor Putricide, he says like this guy only draws gas, and I really like that was hilarious when I first heard it. Um, anyway, yeah, it's pretty funny. Uh, I think that to they had a lot to answer for because the Ungoro metagame was so good. I mean, granted, they can't really control metagame. That's very difficult for a lot of the same reasons that card evaluation is difficult. But they they can't really be blamed for making making a metagame with maybe fewer viable decks in it. But the Frozen Throne metagame ended up eventually being at least okay, as
Yeah,
opposed to in the beginning.
they definitely will get blamed for the metagame being bad, regardless of whether or not they should be responsible for it.
Yeah, I mean, they're the ones who are designing the cards, but
Yep.
it's still like the number of people who are playing Hearthstone to figure out the metagame is just like millions, like tons and tons and tons of people, and the Blizzard team for this game is not nearly that big. I don't know exactly how big it is, but it's not millions. It's definitely not even in the thousands. It might be in the hundreds.
Yeah, and they make none of the decks. They didn't make Patron Warrior. They didn't make Token Druid. They didn't make a single deck. They just made the cards. We made all the decks.
Right, every broken deck, all of those interactions, but
We're the
ultimately,
assholes here.
yep, yep, yep. Ultimately, I mean, they put the interactions in there. They didn't catch them if they're sort of oppressive, but uh,
That yeah, there's so that I think that sort of there's like a fuzzy line
yeah,
where like you've let something be too unfair or you haven't, and it's hard to you probably need to like pick some cards like this one's over the line and this one's not or something like that.
right, right.
But didn't they didn't need to nerf anything from Knights of the Frozen Throne, right?
Um, no. So they did, yeah. Spreading Plague was the only Frozen Throne card that they nerfed, but they had a
Yeah,
really big balance patch.
right. That
Right.
so ultimately that is evidence that they could have balanced things better.
Well, I mean, when you print a card like Ultimate Infestation, you can't honestly believe that it's going to be okay, and I just don't know how they did. Um,
I don't know. I mean, so then after that, they did the dual class arena, and they knew that people would then be able to do with the coin a turn 1 ultimate infestation with
Hmm.
the Warlock card,
Bloodbloom.
Bloodbloom, and like children play this game. People were gonna turn 1 ultimate infestation. Children.
Right.
They knew that was gonna happen. They knew that was gonna happen. They pressed the button. The head like software engineers like, are you sure do you think about the children, Ben? And he's like, just do it. It's like, well, what is this gonna cost us? What are we willing to give up? Everything.
It doesn't matter.
Obviously.
It's worth it.
But I guess they also kind of had to nerf the Death Knights in Arena recently.
Yep,
That's
that's
also
true.
for Knights of the Frozen Throne. Kind of, sort of another whiff on their part to make them that oppressive and not notice it, but I guess it was hard to say.
So that one's a bit of a tough call,
Yeah.
because like the people over at Lightforge, they, their algorithm and on their podcast, they tend to think that those cards are like they're strong but mostly fair. They're
Hmm.
not like they're not the most powerful cards in Arena. There are definitely cards more powerful than them, but they feel so terrible to play against. And I think the community, at large is saying that, and that's ultimately like a good enough reason to remove a card that is strong but not the most powerful card. Because
Hmm.
if everybody feels bad against, everybody feels bad playing against it, everybody's sort of blaming a lot of their terrible experiences in Arena on that thing, then it's better for the game if you just take it out, even if it's balanced ultimately.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. It's not so much about the function of the card in the game so much as how it makes people feel. That's not an
Right.
easy thing to judge. But instead of just talking about things they screwed up in Knights of the Frozen Throne, what we want to talk about some cards we like, right?
Yeah, let's go through. So just like we did for Ungoro, we wanted to make our top five list. So
Top five.
what are the top five cards in Knights of the Frozen Throne? So which we each come up with this list separately, and we'll sort of tell you about it and talk a little bit about them. Do you want to lead with your list, Evan?
Sure. Or should we go back and forth?
Uh, I think we did it all at once last time.
Okay, let's just go balls deep.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So, my first one, I don't know if this is necessarily my number one, like 1 to 5, but it probably would be, is actually Frostlich Jaina.
Okay.
I think that they nailed it with that card. I was sort of disappointed at first when I saw it because I felt like it was low impact, like right when you play it, relative to some of the other ones,
Mm.
like Uther. I was like, oh, it's not going to be as good as Uther.
Yeah, jeez.
Or Anduin. I also didn't think it was going to be as good as Anduin, and I was right about that one. But I really like, and it is kind of true that it's sort of low impact when you play it, but really when you play it, your opponent like they like clench up because they're like, uh oh. I'm
Right.
almost definitely going to lose, regardless of the fact that I've been winning the entire game.
Yeah.
And I just didn't appreciate how effective just getting water elementals was. You don't need to play any elementals. Just keep hero powering and play polymorphs in your deck, and you'll beat literally anything.
Yeah.
And it feels Frostlich Jaina-y. Like, it's hard to describe, but playing her and doing that feels exactly like what being like an evil frost wizard should feel like, I think.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely a really cool card. I mean, it's not quite a build around card. It's sort of more in value territory, but
Hmm.
it's definitely really neat, pretty strong in arena. But
Yes, that one
in
definitely is not fair in Arena.
yeah, but in constructed, I think it's sort of like acceptable, and it gives mage an end game to work towards, which is cool. So like the fact
Hmm.
that it's a class with so many removal spells, like a lot of the rest of the Cabal, it can really leverage that to play a card like that that'll just beat any deck in the late game.
Yeah, that's just another thing I love about it. Also, it's fair, or
Yeah,
like relatively fair compared to, say, Shadow Reaper Anduin.
right.
So
Yeah.
it gives me a little more ability to love it. Um, uh, love it a lot rather than loving it and hating it.
Sure.
Um, but I don't mind loving really unfair cards because my next card is Ultimate Infestation. I
Oh
love that
yeah.
card.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to beat playing that card. That just feels awesome, and it's a really sweet thing in Druid. It mostly helped Jade Druid, but I think really a deck like Big Druid or Easy Big Easy Druid, if you will. You could even throw another Easy in there if you want. That benefited significantly, and that's sort of a really fun, ridiculous, Timmy-ish deck that works because of this card. So it also helped, sort of silly decks, which is something I can like about it that isn't purely competitive.
Right. Yeah, Ultimate Infestation ended up having major impact, immediately. Jade Druid was oppressively strong in the beginning of Knights of the Frozen Throne before they nerfed Innervate. But
Hmm.
it's yeah, it definitely showed up in most druid lists. I mean, all except for the lowest to the ground aggro token druids. It was in all of the lists. Even now,
Hmm.
big druid's actually seeing a lot of success. It's been doing pretty well in the past couple weeks, but obviously it runs 2 copies of Ultimate Infestation. That card just does what you want. You want to working towards casting the first one will almost always pay off after you cast it. Immediately upon casting it, you get ahead. You affect the board. You have a little bit of a life swing. Um, and it's just a really strong card.
And you draw 5 cards. Like if there was any other card in Knights of the Frozen Throne that said draw 5 cards on it, it would probably be on this list too. The other portions of the card are amazing, but like, how do you beat drawing 5 cards? That's just what I want to do. I want to do
Yeah,
that every day.
I mean, drawing. Obviously drawing 5 is strong, but taking an entire turn off is like really big. That's part of the reason why Sprint maybe doesn't see so much play.
Yeah, ultimately, that is such a tempo swing as it makes it playable. I'm just saying what makes me like it so much
Oh yeah,
is
sure.
uh, is that I like taking a turn off to fill my hand. I'm looking forward to playing Alaneth.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
That's gonna be fun. All right, so we got 1 Jaina, 2 Ultimate Infestation, 3 Shadow Essence. I think you may remember I was pretty stoked on that during the review of Knights of the Frozen Throne,
Right.
and I was speaking of a world in which people are like jamming Barnes and Shadow Essence and then using Eternal Servitude to get back Obsidian Statue, and it
Mm-hmm.
all sounded ridiculous.
But and it's a
But
deck.
here we are. I mean, I ultimately using charged Devil Sword wasn't the right route to take necessarily. It could still
Mm.
be good, but Shadow Essence is proven itself to be like a card, and it definitely didn't look like one. And I always like that. I like this is like this looks like garbage, but there's a way if we do this and this and this and follow this unnecessarily convoluted path, it can be a card. It's like why would we do that? I don't know, but I'm already halfway through the maze, so we're doing it. And that's sort of how I felt about Shadow Essence when I saw it. It's like there's a way to make this not terrible. And I'm glad that that sort of worked its way out through the community and the cards were there. Because very often the cards are not there with this kind of dream.
Mm.
But apparently they were. And it really is effective at mitigating sort of like whiffs because it always gives you a 5/5.
Yeah,
It's just
that's
a
really good
really
point.
nice. A really nice silly card. I think they're pretty good at making those in this game.
Yeah, it's cool because it's sort of one of many like build around type cards that they added. Because obviously, just pulling a vanilla 5/5 or like a 5/5 that does nothing on average is like terrible for 6 mana. You're looking to do way
Hmm.
better than that. But this card can potentially let you get out more expensive cards that have insane value abilities like Ysera or Lich King or Yasharj, and or even Obsidian Statue. Like a
Hmm.
5/5 Obsidian Statue is still gross.
It's a beating.
So yeah, it's a beating. Um, Yeah, so it's a pretty cool effect. It's like nifty, and I think that maybe they were experimenting with the recruit or recruit type things, that we're going to see from the next set.
Yep.
I They have the luxury of because they don't have to deal with like printing presses and stuff like that. They have the luxury of making balance changes, um, sort of in light of evidence from previous sets, like or the immediately preceding set. Whereas Wizards has to, by the time they released Amonkhet, they probably already had Hour of Devastation printed, and thus couldn't
Hmm.
make any changes to it. So Blizzard is they were probably doing some amount of testing for Recruit with this card, but it's also just a really cool card.
Yep. That's part of the reason. This card's part of the reason why I'm pretty certain I'm gonna be excited for recruit and try and find some cute ways to recruit things.
Sure.
Um, one thing though that was really fun about Shadow Essence that I didn't appreciate at first is I realized you said you can get high cost minions and get high value. I hadn't realized is you could also get a lower cost minion like Acolyte of Pain.
Oh,
Turns out
sure.
that as a 5/5 is totally like worth more than 6 mana.
Yep.
So you can also cheat, like get a cheaty 5/5 that is worth way more than 6 mana by using a minion that costs less than 6, and that was like pretty cool. Like even Tainted Zealot, like oh,
Right.
like that's fair at 6 mana. That would be a fair Hearthstone card, but it was still much more than I was expecting. A 5/5 Divine Shield, spell damage +1,
Sure.
is like pretty cool. It's like oh, that's cute. I'd like be friends with that. Friend that on Facebook. Um, Number 4 is Shadow Reaper Anduin. I mean, I just also love that card. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not ashamed of myself. That card is amazing, and it's also really fun obliterating people with it.
Yeah.
That's there's not much more to say. Like you could blow people up in one turn. I had a druid opponent go to like I played Anduin and they went to like 44 on their turn with like earthen scales. And I was like, cool, and I killed them.
Yeah.
And
No, that's awesome.
that's a fun time, and that's a fun turn, and it is also ultimately the Razaka's deck is not easy to play. I
No.
think that it takes a lot of diligence, even after you've gotten Anduin of like counting how much damage you have. There's a lot of subtlety to the deck, so it also made what I think is a fun, cool control combo deck. I know everybody doesn't like it, but or not everybody likes it. But I like the deck that it spawned, and I think it's a good card, and it works in the Shadow Essence deck, so that doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I like it. I like it too. I mean, I think that Priest got enough tools to get multiple decks out of this expansion that it just has never had before, which is really cool. Because Priest was sort of in a moratorium for a very long time. Um, so it was nice that they sort of came back in a big way here.
Yeah, that was a
Anduin's
meme.
definitely part of that. Yep. Yeah. I mean, Anduin was a really big part of that. That card is very strong when it comes out. And obviously, it's a part of an engine for the Razakis deck, both in Wild and in Standard. And it's like, that's pretty cool. You need to have something very, very strong in order to motivate you to go singleton. Reno Jackson is that thing. That thing is also strong, but that's not standard anymore. But, Anduin coming out turned out to be enough because just adding Raza to Anduin is something gross that can win the game with no help.
Yep, it's pretty much devastating, and
Yeah.
there's nothing quite like it.
Hmm.
There's no Hearthstone card remotely like it. Usually, when you're trying to judge how good a card is, you would compare it to another one. Like, well, is it like Piloted Shredder, or is it like Magma Rager? And
Right.
that should give whichever one is more like that will give you an idea: is it good or is it bad? Um, this one is this. I think Shadow Reaper Anduin's an easy 5 as far as Hearthstone cards go.
Yeah, it's a super strong card.
It's a lot like Reno, like you said. You need a really compelling reason, but it is actually that it is that good. It gets around everything.
Right.
There's no, there's some pretty strong warrior cards. You would even think that like Bring It On or whatever could potentially be good against Anduin, but they just like they can either do 2 damage to you every turn or explode you. Like they can win
Hmm.
the gradual strategy. They can also ace you immediately. Um, so the deck also has all this versatility. So it's really like a pretty unreal win condition.
Yeah, definitely. Very strong. It's also hard to interact with.
Yep, can't even like counterspell it.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome. Your opponent plays a secret and thinking they're all safe, and you're like Shadow Reaper Anduin. Nothing is safe.
I'll play around all of them and beat you.
It's like I already drew this, and you probably don't like that. It probably makes you feel bad, especially because I played Rouse turn 5. I had a few of those last night. That feels great.
Oh
Just
yeah.
turn 5 Rouse, turn 8 Anduin. Like you didn't even have a chance. You had no idea.
Yep. I've lost a lot of games to that. I've lost a lot of priest mirrors to other priests who do that. I've won a lot of games like that. It's usually good enough.
It's pretty gross.
Yep.
So for my number 5, I have Defile.
Okay.
That's like so I didn't actually play that much Warlock, um, and part of that reason, or part of the reason for that is I can only use 2 Defiles. If I could use like 10 of that card, I would play Warlock all the time. It is
Sure.
just it's like it's the removal spell you want, and you can really kind of get away with it being like your only one. Like it works with itself. It works with everything else. It works with Mortal Coil. It works with Hellfire. Like there's nothing it doesn't work with. Some cards it works with especially well with, like Tainted Zealot. Yeah, like 9 Defiles and 2 Tainted Zealots. You don't need any more removal. Then their crap is gonna be dead. They're not gonna get to do anything.
Right.
Um, and the card and it's 2 mana. It's like it's a dream. Um, and you know if you're playing any control warlock deck, and that's generally I prefer that to Zoo, um, mostly because it's the hero power is just amazing in a control deck. But paying 2 mana, just wiping their board, like even if it's enormous, like I enjoy that. That makes me smile.
Yeah, I mean, being able to double spell with that, so like wipe their board then play a threat is really good. It's also pretty cool because it rewards like good play in a particular way. Like it can be tough to set up defiles,
Yeah,
but and sometimes it's like not quite random, but it can feel close to random when defile is like really good. But it forces you to consider all of the lines available to you at least when you're about to play it, and that's really cool. And you can just like play 10-dimensional chess and think about it a couple turns ahead and like lead your opponent into making trades and stuff like that. I think that actually doesn't come up that often, but you do have the option of doing that, and if you're doing that, then defile is going to be a lot stronger.
yeah. I did have that. There was definitely something I enjoyed about the card is I had a few opportunities to 10-dimensional chess and be like, well, if I they have so many things out, I'm just like thinking about whether or not I should just play some minion to let it die, or if I should tap. And like, well, he'll probably attack my guy, and then that'll be at 1, and then that'll set me up if I draw a Defile.
Right, right.
And getting to work out those plays is pretty fun.
That's pretty cool.
And I gotta give a nod to Bone Mare.
Hmm.
That's a pretty fun card, but um, I'm more into playing Shadow Reaper Anduin, I guess.
No, that makes sense. So that's actually a good transition, because Bone Mare is a card in my top 5 list.
There we go.
So, I mean, I think Bone Mare does a lot of good things. So, first of all, it's an incredibly strong card, and it has a place in a ton of decks. But um, in addition to that, it's a common. But more than just being a strong common, it is a strong common at a high mana cost.
Hmm.
And that tends to not exist that often. A lot of the expensive commons tend to be like pretty bad
Hmm.
because legendary rares or epics tend to be the really good high costed spells. But Bone Mare
Yeah.
is a common and it's excellent. It costs 7.
I can't. Yeah, I can't even think of another example. That's like that might be just the best high above. Might be the best 7 and up common
Yeah, it's just great.
of Hearthstone.
I can't think of. I also can't really think of any right now. But Druid probably has something. No, no, maybe not. Because
And you could, if you restrict it to neutral,
yeah, if you're restricting, that's true. If you're restricting to neutral, then
I
definitely
mean,
not. But yeah, I mean, and
yeah,
that's another thing. It's also neutral cards, so there's a lot of decks that some classes are better at certain parts of the curve than other classes, and this is just like it gives a lot of decks an option at a sort of a higher mana cost for a mid-range deck because
hmm
oftentimes you're going to try to build one of those if you think you can get out the gate early with a bunch of low-cost dominions that are good. There's already a bunch of great ones at neutral, Firefly and Pirates and Patches and all sorts of stuff. But Bone Mare is just awesome. I mean, the card does a
hmm
ton when it comes out. It's really good in Arena. It's really excellent and constructed. It's funny with shenanigans like Shadow Step. It's
yeah,
a cool and strong card. It has a really big impact immediately, and it's just a ton of stats for its mana cost.
yeah. Bone Mare's insane.
Yeah,
It's undeniable. It should probably be a beast though.
yeah. I see why they didn't do that. I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's a balance thing.
it has to be. It feels like there's discontinuity a little bit,
Yeah.
but I can forgive them for. I mean, ultimately, like you said, it's for balance. But I'd rather have an imbalanced game. What are you asking for, Evan? What do you really
Yeah,
want? No, that's true. But yeah, plenty of other like classes, like I don't know, warlock or rogue. Really, they can build up uh, an army, but not on the scale and not as quickly as like Token Druid was doing it. They
yeah,
could do it a little bit later, and then Bone Mare says, as long as you can get your stuff together by turn 7, you're good to go. Like, trust me,
yeah,
dude. Like, if you have a board on turn 7, you're gonna be a-okay. Bone Mare's like a politician, just like trying to get you to like give him a chance, and you're like, okay. And yeah, it turned out to be true. A lot of decks that didn't really have aggro decks, or a lot of classes that didn't have aggro decks, suddenly got them from Bone Mare.
yeah. I mean, there's even more subtlety to it. So it rewards you for putting a lot of one-costed minions in your deck, and it rewards you for playing Firefly because then on turn 8 you can just get both effects immediately and not have to. You could have a totally empty board, but still capitalize on the effect.
This is
And
also
that's a
true.
it's a big play. I mean, if you were to play, just get like maybe a 5/6 and a 5/5 for 8 mana, that's pretty good. One of them has taunt. That's probably gonna like not stabilize, but it might help you live another turn. It might help you like kill something.
Yeah, it's like Twin Emperor Veclor, kind of, except not nearly as much work.
Right.
You just need to be playing 2 good Hearthstone cards instead of, playing Beckoner of Evil.
Right. So, um, of course, if I want to love Bone Mare for being a really good common, then I should also include Cobalt Scalebane.
Yes, that's another great pick.
So Cobalt Scalebane is good for a lot of the reason that Bone Mare is good. It's a sort of mid-rangey type card that is neutral and it's common. So even if you're trying to build a budget deck, you can put Bone Mare and Cobalt Scalebane into your deck and like probably do okay. The
hmm
card itself is really strong and it's a good dragon for Curator. So that was a Curator had a bit of a blind spot on dragons for most decks because you either wanted Primordial Drake or you just really didn't have a hit in
hmm
Standard.
Yeah,
There's no Azure Drake anymore, but Cobalt
rip.
Scalebane came out, and yeah, rip indeed. Scalebane came out, and that turned out to be really good for some decks, and actually better than Drake in some decks that were running Drake, like mid-range Paladin. So, mid-range Paladin, if it wanted to run Curator, could now run Cobalt Scalebane, which synergizes excellently with its hero power and the entire strategy of just trying to play low-costed dudes and make them scary. Cobalt Scalebane will help you do that. And it's a 5 mana 5/5, which is a fine stat line. So,
Yeah, it looked like a great card on paper when we were
yeah,
reviewing it, just like Bone Mare. And we were both like, these cards look really good, but I think just like they're like common and expensive, and so we were like, common expensive cards are never good. And these really they look good. Are they gonna be good? I don't know. They're not usually, but these Cobalt Scalebane, obviously Bone Mare, but Cobalt Scalebane is definitely the real deal for
yep.
sure. I mean, if card's gross in Tempo Rogue.
Yeah, it's really
It's
strong.
a really strong Hearthstone card once again.
I mean,
Common.
cards that do things at the end of turn are basically doing something the turn they come out. They are doing something the turn they
Yeah,
come
it's
out.
like an ETB.
Yeah, yeah, it's very similar to a battle cry.
Oh, right, there's a word for it in this game. I, I immediately, after I said ETB, was like, that's for some reason that doesn't sound appropriate in the situation, but I can't put my finger on it.
So, yeah, no, it's definitely a keyword. Um, so
Thanks,
I
Mark.
have a. You are welcome. So I have two cards on my list in common tiers. I have Ultimate Infestation.
Yeah.
So I think this is just the best card in the set.
Oh,
That is it's immensely powerful. I mean, its impact was felt immediately upon being released. I think it's like one of the only cards in the set that I think is too strong. So
yeah, I could see
it
that.
it came out. I mean, I guess Shadow Reaper Anduin could be the other contender for best card in the set, but
That's where my mind went. But you might be right. Like the J Druid numbers, like you said at the very beginning, were absurd.
yeah, I mean, it was obscene. It was a deck that, J Druid existed and it was like strong, but then it got Ultimate Infestation and it didn't need to do silly stuff anymore. It didn't need to run cards like Earthen Scale so it can enable Auctioneer. It could just run two Ultimate Infestation and just gas. And it
Hmm.
ended up getting all these flex slots that it could use, and people started running Kun. It's just really like incredibly powerful card.
Yeah, you could say that it's the reason why Innervate and Spreading Plague got banned, or like the main reason, like or not banned, nerfed. Um, so it didn't Ultimate Infestation didn't get nerfed, but you could say that it was so good it got a bunch of other cards nerfed,
Yeah,
which is
I'd
pretty
like to think
strong.
so.
That's not many cards. You can't say that about many cards.
Yeah, because I mean, like, Innervate Fledgling was degenerate, but I don't think that was enough to make, I think people were still thinking, like, Fledgling's the problem there. Innervate was like a fine card before Ultimate Infestation came out. But once Ultimate Infestation came out, Innervate helps you get there faster. It also helps you do something the turn that you play it. And 10 mana cards are balanced in part knowing that once you play them, you're just done for the turn. It's not like you're going to double spell with a 10 mana card, but you could actually Ultimate Infestation Wrath or Ultimate Infestation like Druidless Worm or something like that. So it's just the card is disgusting. It is a disgusting amount of stuff to do on one card. I mean, the old 17 mana worth of effects meme. It is a hugely powerful card. Uh, I think it's the best in the set.
Yeah, it's no BS and really against any druid that's not playing like super aggro. The whole game for both players is like, does he have ultimate infestation and when is he going to play it? And
Yep,
that's the side of a card maybe being too good is when
yeah,
every game is about it.
yep. I mean, when I was playing J Druid pre Innervate Nerf, my for the first several turns, I was basically exclusively thinking about casting Ultimate Infestation, and even when I started playing J Druid afterwards, it was similar to that. In most games, in most matchups, with the exception of maybe against like Hunter, like the really fast decks,
Hmm.
you are focused on playing your Ultimate Infestation. To the extent that you'll keep it in your opening hand in a lot of matchups,
I
and it's
ultimately was doing that.
yeah, same here. It's a 10 mana card, but like it's totally worth keeping. Um, so the other contender is of course Shadow Reaper Anduin, another card on my list. So that would be number 4. So we talked at length about Shadow Reaper Anduin. This card enabled an entire archetype. It's enough to win the game on its own. It's really strong. It gave a class something. It gave a class access to a win condition, and Priest was sort of light on that. It definitely had removal, but just nothing to do with it. And fatigue decks weren't doing so well because of J Druid, but Anduin came around and gave that deck a little more to aspire to. It gave it a sort of a proactive way to win when the game went late, something to work towards, something to draw, and that's really awesome.
Yeah, and
So,
he also has pretty cool hair.
yeah, the art is pretty cool, and the voice lines are too.
Yeah,
Um,
the full art, where you can see the background is pretty badass. There's like a bunch of like specters, and they're like really scared. They're like terrified of him.
that's funny. Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that. I don't think I've seen the full art for these.
It's pretty. It like what are what are specters afraid of? Like this guy apparently. Oh shit.
Anduin. Wow. So the last card on my list is Prince Kelesith.
Yeah, Kelly's fun.
Yep. So I wanted to so there's a bunch of cards I wanted to talk about. A bunch of cards I think that are really good. Ultimately, I wanted to narrow down to the cards I thought were the most impactful, and I think that maybe Cobalt Scalebane is the one that belongs on this list the least. But I think Kelesith definitely does.
Mm-hmm.
Part of so Kelesith is a key part in two decks right now. So in Tempo Rogue and in Zoo Warlock.
Mm-hmm.
And even if the decks ultimately don't need Kelesith to win, because you absolutely you never play a deck that did need it to win, I think it gives them enough percentage to be viable decks. At least Zoo. Tempo Rogue might be good without it. But the Zoo deck, I think, is really like, it's using the percentage it's getting from Kelesith to not just be a crappy version of Tempo Rogue.
Yeah, so, and it has the hero power, so it just has better odds of getting Kelesith in a given game.
Yep, that's true. And something strong to do on turn 2 because it doesn't have any other 2-mana plays, and that's another reason why Rogue is good at running Kelesith. You know, that's a reason why Warrior is bad at running Kelesith.
Right.
So it's a really, it's a strong card. I do think that it's a little controversial. I think that like maybe it's not the best design, but one thing that's cool that it does is put deck building constraints on you, and those are always fun to play with. That always sort of tickles the inner Johnny in us, the person who just wants to build like a cool deck.
Mm-hmm.
And asking us to take out 2-drops is quite an ask. 2s are really important in this game, and Kelesith just makes you run none of them.
Yeah,
but luckily
the princes all looked like Garbagerino.
Yep.
At the beginning, and it turns out actually 2 of them are playable, but this one's actually pretty strong. So that's pretty wild.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard to like see that effect and not think it's going to be utter trash, because it's not, on its own, it's such a big limitation, and you just start thinking of a class and be like, well, I can't take Eviscerate out of my deck, or, I don't want to, I want to play Drain Soul.
Mm-hmm.
I want to play Defile, but ultimately, that's not the question you should be asking, is like, what am I losing? That's part of it, but you should be asking, like, can I play 28 other cards, 29 other cards, none of which cost 2, that will synergize enough with this card to make a deck that will win? And that's way hard to see at a glance, You have to see an entire deck at a glance. You just can't do that.
Yeah. I think it also was not like being appreciated before the set came out, how playing Kelesith and then playing a South Sea Captain could get you a 3/3, or using Shadow Step with Kelesith was a good idea. Like, I think those were things people weren't thinking about when they were looking at it. They were just thinking about, all right, turn 2 I play a 2/2, and then turn 3 hopefully I draw a 3-drop from my deck or something, and that'll be buffed. It wasn't being considered that you might be able to do it more than once, and that if you play a South Sea Captain, you're basically getting like a lightning bolt.
Right. Yeah. No, that card turned out to be really strong. That was a little bit of a sleeper. I mean, that's very late in Patch's life did people start playing that card.
South Sea Captain, yep.
Yeah. I mean, that wasn't even in the original Pirate Warrior builds.
It's true. I guess. I mean, they had Fiery War Axe at 2 mana, but even still, like, it's 3 mana for a 5 and 5. Like, that's gross.
Yep. Yeah, it is. I mean, back in small time Buccaneer days, they weren't running it, and that makes sense maybe because you just had that insane 1-drop. You're trying to win sooner than that matters. But yeah, I mean, these days that card's awesome, especially in decks that are looking to have a turn 3 play that's strong enough to make up for a weak turn 2 play, like strong enough to make up for just hero powering on turn 2. That card's awesome. It does the job. It's a lot of stats.
That's probably partly why the card became more popular, is because there became decks that were not playing 2-drops.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And so having a follow-up was more relevant.
Yeah, I think so. So why don't we talk about some of the other cool things that Knights of the Frozen Throne did?
Let's do it.
So I mean, the first is something I think we had an entire episode on. It's the Death Knights.
Yeah, the changing you know, there's a lot of cool things like a global permanent change. Like those are always fun, and there's not many cards that do that in Hearthstone. Things change pretty fast. Things are pretty ephemeral. So something as permanent as this is pretty neat.
Yeah.
Um, and in some cases, it really changed your game plan, which is also really cool. That's something I liked. Rexar he said like, "Oh, I'm not going to be shooting you in the face and you go face. I'm not a smork anymore. Now I'm like someone who makes the dead come to not a necrophile, necromancer. That's what
Necromancer.
I do not. That's the one.
A big difference. It definitely changed the gameplay for a lot of the classes, like upon being played. Some of them didn't, like Malfurion. That
Hmm.
would just more or less improve Druid, what Druid was already
More
trying
of the
to do.
same. More of the same with Malfurion.
Yeah, more of the same. And I mean, it was a really strong card. It was just a really good value play. Had a ton of effect the moment you played it, but also got a ton of value over the course of the rest of the game. Thrall was something like sort of similar. Doesn't really change the way you play, but cards like Jaina and Gul'dan and Anduin, and Rexar, these are all changing just the way you're approaching your next several turns, because you really want to squeeze a hero power in there and get something out of it.
Hmm.
In the case of Anduin, you want to squeeze in like 5, but in the case of Rexar, like you might even be using your entire turn on your hero power, just building something and then playing it. For Jaina, you're really looking to set up sniping things with your hero power so you can get 3/6 life steals that freeze things. That's gross. And Gul'dan, just that you're gonna win if you press that hero power button like enough times.
Yeah, that one's particularly gross, and it seemed like it was just sort of very similar to Malfurion's maybe at first,
Yeah,
but then when you use it, you realize how absurd it is. Um,
yep,
and yeah, it's like they really make you feel like you have superpowers or have like on leveled up or something like that, because the hero powers really do feel impactful. They did a
yep.
really good job with that, and they all feel different. None of the Death Knights feel like any of the other Death Knights.
Yeah, they're definitely all really unique, and even some of the ones that are like, so some of them are kind of underperformed, like Garrosh Uther, and unfortunately Valera. But I think I think at least Valera could see play later. But
Yeah,
I'm a little less confident.
she seemed legitimately good. Um,
I think so too.
there have been times I'm playing as Rogue and I'm playing Priest, which is usually very good for me. And I'll play Anduin or something and make some play that like next turn this guy is toast. And then I think unless he plays Valera, then I don't
Right.
know. I don't know what would happen. Like God only knows what happens after you play that card because it completely changes how the rogue can play. They suddenly
Yeah,
get like
totally.
so much bonus value out of any individual card they play, um, and they're copying cards from your deck. So like suddenly you could get like 2 greater healing potions or something. I don't know. Um, so it's a very swingy card, and it seems like it's all you know. I think one of the problems with it is that if you can't put as much weight on it as you can with Priest, because Priest is
Yeah.
going to do a better job slowing down the game and drawing, rather than Rogue, which can't heal itself and takes damage from using its hero power and doesn't have things like Dragonfire Potion. That's part of the reason why Valera doesn't shine as much, but the card seems good.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if Miracles comes back in vogue, then we'll see probably Arcane Giant Miracles builds with Valera. We saw
Hmm.
Arcane Giant Miracles in Ungoro. It was never really top tier, but Valera makes that, you're able to do some pretty degenerate things and use like Vanish as mass removal, and that's strong.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be something we have to deal with potentially, and I'm not looking forward to it. It's a
Nope.
really cool card, but it is not easy to play against,
No, no, no. I mean, after so many turns, they're drawing an extra card every turn. You're not, and that's like a great way to win.
especially if
So
it's
they're
an
drawing and
8/8.
playing. Yeah, right, right. I mean, when they start copying those, it can just feel totally unfair. Um, so the Death Knights are cool. I mean, we talked about them at length in the past, and I think that a lot of our evaluations probably haven't changed too much on them. They're interesting, and there's a lot of subtlety to them.
Yeah,
Um,
the community, I guess maybe. I mean, the one recent change, like we said before, is the arena change. They're taken out of there, so that's
yeah,
maybe if there's a whiff or a miss in any regard to the Death Knights, that would be the only one. Is how they feel in arena, not
yep,
even how they perform necessarily.
yeah, definitely. Um, so some of the Death Knights were sort of build around type cards, but there were a lot of non-legendary build around cards in Knights of the Frozen Throne also, which I think is really cool. So of
Hmm.
course, Death Knights are legendary build around cards, but there's also stuff like you mentioned Shadow Essence and Eternal Servitude.
Hmm.
Those cards are like peas in a pod, and they go together really well with other cards like Barnes and just massive scary guys. So like that's a deck that's Big Priest.
Yeah,
Um,
charged Devil Star, man.
Yeah, of course, the top tier meta breaker charged Delver. I mean, that's to be fair, that's actually pretty insane with Internal Servitude.
It's also awesome with Shadow Essence. It's like, oh, five
Yep.
five charge, get in there, buddy.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. But there were a bunch more like Corpse Taker. That card looked really cool
Hmm. That was
when I saw
actually
it.
on my list at a point.
Yep, I definitely looked at it when I was scrolling through the spoiler just to see which cards I would put on. It was definitely something I sort of nodded to. It's a card that looked strong. It looked like it was asking for something kind of big, but that some classes wouldn't have any trouble getting, like Paladin. And it turned out that was true. So Corpse Taker was like, it was good enough. The card did a lot. It did something that Paladin was already like pretty good at and was looking to do more of, which is just put out like annoying Divine Shield taunts because those are hard to deal with.
Hmm.
Um, but it could also double as a really big threat if it had Wind Fury or Lifesteal.
It got people to play Stormwatcher. How can you not love a card that does that?
Right. I mean that's also awesome. I got to play Stormwatcher because of Corpse Taker and playing that and then like untapping and putting Blessing of Kings on it, you just feel like you're playing Arena. You feel like your opponent was trying to play a game constructed Hearthstone and you just played a silly deck and crushed them with it. That's what it feels like.
Just smushing them with a giant air elemental.
Yeah, it's gross.
Fun time.
Um
Um, yeah, these all put like deck constraints and limitations, but those are that's how you breed creativity.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was Mark Rosewater, restrictions breed creativity. Um
Narrow.
So that's really cool, and I mean we should always acknowledge these sort of build around type cards because these are the ones that inspire deck building. Nobody looks at Bone Mare and is like, man, I want to build a Bone Mare deck. Like, no, you just want to build a deck with minions in it and put Bone Mare in it.
You just want to
So
bone mare stuff. You just want to ride the bone.
you just want to ride the bone. That's all you're trying to do.
Who can blame you?
So other cards, the princes, of course, those are more legendary build around type cards. Those have really intense deck building constraints. And the other one I have here is Strong Shell Scavenger. That one fell out of favor when Innervate got nerfed, but definitely the most shockingly playable card in the set for me.
Me too.
It's I still think it's pretty marginal. I think that like that mid range deck was really good at beating the day one meta because day one meta has a lot of like minion based decks, and that deck is all taunts. But also just you were ultimately casting Innervate, Nourish, Ultimate Infestation, Wild Growth. So it
Yeah,
was going to be a good deck.
yeah, it was good without that, and it also has that surprise value. Like you weren't expecting them to suddenly have
Yeah,
a bunch of 3/7s.
right. And they could easily just suddenly amass a board that's like, wow, I will never beat that board.
Once
And
you
that
caught
was
on that
awesome.
that's what they were gonna do, and as long as you don't put so many minions out that they can get a gross spreading plague, um, like, and they would get you like turn 7 with Innervate, like that's how it would be surprising. Once you got smart on that, the deck was not nearly as good.
Yeah, definitely. Um, but in addition to these build around me type cards, like we had mentioned earlier, there's just strong playable common neutral cards. Bone Mare and Scalebane being the two biggest examples. I think that's and a lot of strong common cards in general. I mean, like Righteous Protector, um, and the like Acris Veteran. So I think that's really important for a game like this. I mean, maybe the people listening to this podcast and certainly us are entrenched enough that we have a big collection. We have a collection with enough cards you can play whatever meta deck, or if we want to build something silly, chances are we have all the pieces for it. but not every player is in that position. And printing cards like Bone Mare and Scalebane just like helps those players out especially, and it makes the game just more accessible to more people. And that's good for the longevity of the game. That's good for for every single person. If more people are playing the game, all of us benefit.
Yeah, it's really important in that regard, and I guess it's something that we could forget about. Though I definitely don't have, I can't do every silly thing I want. I don't have any meat wagons, and I want to like make a meat wagon deck so badly, but I don't have any.
Mm. Yeah, I have no Malagos. I have neither Deathwing. I think I have a Meat Wagon, but I don't want to do that. But I have no small time recruits, so like I also can't do every silly thing that I want to do. But anything I want to do that involves Cobalt, Scalebane, or Bone Mare, I can totally do.
Yeah, and it also so the commons being so good helps mitigate sort of the feel bad from playing against a really good legendary. Like
Yeah,
like if all the best cards and if you're gonna play the best card in Hearthstone is only gonna be a legendary card, that kind of sucks because that just means that when you get lucky you win and when you don't you lose. Cards like Bone Mare and Cobalt Skullbane really help with that. You can just play cards that are better than many legendaries at common.
yeah, yeah, and I mean that's awesome. So actually, I think that that's a reasonable criticism of the set that I've seen recently, and that I've thought a little bit about, is that a lot of the class legendaries, the non-Death Knights, like basically all of them were pretty bad,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
that's unfortunate. So
that's true.
the other side, yeah, none of them are really good. I mean, the best one is like Bolvar Fireblood or like Professor Putricide.
Uh-oh, when you're saying that, that's a really bad sign.
Yeah, they're all pretty horrendous. And I mean, I can understand why this is. It's there. I made like a Reddit post about this a while ago. There's like this Goldilocks zone when it comes to designing a legendary card. You want it like when you hover over a card and see that orange, you're excited and you want to click it and be stoked.
Hmm.
And that's why you're excited, because you're going to click it and be stoked. You're not excited because you're like, man, yes, I got 400 dust. So when you open any of those cards, they're very unexciting. They're not very strong. They they're like either balanced to bad.
Hmm.
On the other hand, um, you can't put all of your powerful card or even all your powerful cards or your most powerful cards at legendary, because if you do that, then your game just becomes inaccessible and too expensive, and everyone complains about how hard it is to play and like how much money you need to spend on the game in order to be competitive, and like that's a really bad place to be also.
Hmm.
So the Goldilocks zone is making cards that are strong but not oppressively strong. And one approach to that is just making, X legendaries and having some fraction of X be good and the rest of it be bad. That's one possible approach to that, rather than having every legendary be good. The other possible approach is just making perfectly tuned, perfectly balanced cards, but that's not easy.
No, and it could be a little boring. And I think that another way to look at rarity is, and I'm pretty certain this is how they do it with Magic, but I think it's also applicable in Hearthstone. Is rather than rarity representing goodness, rarity represents like complicatedness,
Yeah, they do that to some
or
extent.
craziness and ridiculousness of what the card does. Like the legendary cards are the ones that have the really weird text. Like
Like Heliseth.
yeah, Prince Keliseth or Jaraxxus. Like
Or Archbishop Benedictus or Hemet.
yeah, like well, I mean, you do know what those cards do. You don't know what Jaraxxus does.
Oh yeah, Draxus, you have no idea.
So
Yeah.
or like the another warlock card, the first disciple chick Rin, and she dies and gives you the first seal. Like, what does that do? If they wouldn't make a common that says when this dies, you get the first seal.
Right.
And not because that's too good. That card's probably awful. It seems really bad. But
Right.
it would have been confusing to put it on a common, and then everybody always has to deal with the first seal and the second seal and the third seal. That would be too much. And so if you put it on legendary, it doesn't come up as often, but you could still get you get to have your cake and eat it too. You still get to have the silly thing in your game, and
Yep.
if you really want to do that dumb thing, then you have the option to. But we don't we don't have to deal with it all the time. But
Yeah.
they can sort of like, they can like play to different um, types of people that play the game and people's varying interests. Some people like priest more, some people like rogue more. So if you like priest, you might really like a super grindy game where you like copying all of your opponent's cards. So you can play Archbishop Benedictus.
Yep.
Or maybe
Totally.
you like copying your opponent's like cards by stealing them like a rogue and doing stuff like that. You can play uh, Liliana Vess. I don't actually know what the Hearthstone card is called.
I
Lillian
think it's
Voss.
Lillian Voss.
Yeah. But the legendaries also do provide a way to do that, and I think ultimately these legendaries from Knights of the Frozen Throne each had a pretty solid flavor and did a cool thing for a particular strategy, like Professor Putricide and Secrets in Hunter. Um,
Right.
so even though they're not strong, they all succeeded in at least maybe potentially amplifying a fun, maybe Johnny-ish or Timmy-ish strategy. Um, and when they're making the Death Knights, they had to really be careful with the power level of the other legendaries in this
Yeah.
set.
Yeah. Most certainly. So that's something. I think that you made a really good point in there, which is that some of these cards, even if they're not like, they're not 10 out of 10 strong, which there's reason they don't do that. Um, some players will really like them, like the more Johnny-ish players will see Archbishop Benedictus be like, wow, what a cool effect. How can I make a deck around this? And then they did. And then they made, the people made that like Hemet Benedictus deck, and it looks ridiculous, and it is ridiculous, but it's got to feel so cool when you get it to work. Because you're like, wow, I did the thing and it was really neat.
Yeah, no, that's
Um,
definitely one of the joys of Hearthstone.
yep. And I mean, that was another one of, and more wisdom from Mark Rosewater was that, like, when you're designing cards, you don't just want everybody to say, oh, this is 6 or 7 out of 10. You want some people to say, this is 2 out of 10, I would never play it. And other people to say, like, this is 9 out of 10, I really want to play this card. And the way to do that is not always going to be to just design a good card, because then everybody will say it's somewhere between 7 and 10 out of 10.
A great example would be Gnome Feratu. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
How do
though.
you design a bad card and get people to say it's a 10?
Yep. I mean, that's certainly some people were, River Crocolisk, and then the high rollers among us are like, no, you just get their Anduin every time you play it. You play that and they can't win anymore. Sounds
I
broken.
do have a screenshot of me doing that, of Gnome Feratuing an Anduin.
That's good.
But yeah, I took a screenshot of it because I knew it was only happening once.
Right. Yeah, not gonna happen that
But
often.
even if the card's bad, it's definitely made Hearthstone more fun, and in a bunch of different ways, both like playing the game and also the community having their
Yeah.
reactions.
Yeah, totally. So it's interesting at least, but so that's one possible criticism, that some of the class legendaries are pretty weak, but I
Mm-hmm.
think there are some others. They printed a few cards that I think are controversial, at least.
Mm-hmm.
That are, maybe good but too good, or good in ways that's not fun. So I
Yeah,
think,
we mentioned UI and Anduin both maybe. Well, we
yeah,
listed them as possibly the best, or probably the best card from the set. I think those are the two best cards in the set. But
yeah,
the UI and also Anduin could be too good.
yeah. Ultimate Infestation is just, you're doing way too much. The card is just like, yes, you take a turn off, but you're not even taking a turn off. You can like kill something, and then you get a guy, and then you draw 5 cards, and you get 5 armor. So what else could you want to do? Doing anything else would be absurd,
Yeah,
and it was.
that makes that's sort of like why they put Azure Drake in Wild. Like why play another, or put it in the Hall of Fame? Why play another 5-drop and you play Azure Drake? So
Yeah,
so now it's sort of like, rather than with cards, because it's cards 10, it's with strategies. Like why play Beast Druid and play like a Beast on turn 2 and a Beast on turn 3 when I could get Mana Crystals on turn 2 and turn 3 and play Ultimate Infestation? Like
right.
doing some non ramp into UI strategy in Druid just like doesn't seem like a good idea when you could do that instead. And that's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
good for, the creativity side of the game.
It takes like the entire midsection out of Druid's class cards.
Yeah, and that's a lot of them. And then it also doesn't feel good to play against it, and it's just sort of like a shutout in a lot of situations, which is, another sign that it's too powerful.
Yep, a lot of games just sort of end on the spot. It lets them be really greedy. It builds a lot of forgiveness into your gameplay. It's just a really strong card that survived nerf somehow, but might not survive more nerfs. It's a card that I think if I saw adjusted later down the line in Hearthstone, I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe not next patch, maybe not the expansion after that, maybe the expansion like after that. I don't know. At some point, if this got changed, I wouldn't be surprised.
One concern would be if you. It's cool that it's getting played. It's good that they made a card that people are using, rather than make something that's too weak and not getting played and not fun. If we nerf it, then it'll be too weak and it won't get played anymore. I think there is a nerf that exists that there'd probably still be the easy big easy druid easy deck that would still use 2 copies of Ultimate Infestation without it having all those 5s on it. I think that's like they would definitely take a couple 3s on there or removing numbers and still play that card. At least that deck would. And then there'd be a reason to do other things in Druid.
Right. Yeah, it's we'll see. We'll see what they do with this.
Yeah, but that's definitely at least a question worth asking. Is that one too good? And then sort of a lot of the same things with Anduin, and that when they play it, it's just kind of over a lot of the time. Very uninteractive. Like there's not much you can do about Ultimate Infestation coming down, and there's definitely very little you can do about Anduin coming down.
Yeah, that's kind of annoying. Is like, so Priest needed a way to win. That's something that like it was in maybe dire need of. Anduin is certainly that. It lets you play the answer deck, that hard control deck that players like. But it can't. The problem with it is it can't be interacted with, and it also puts a limit on the types of control decks that can be played. So like, or the types of late game decks that can be played rather. In order to beat this deck, you need to basically win suddenly. A good example of a deck that wins suddenly is, of course, Rozaka's Priest, but also like Quest Mage wins suddenly. Jade Druid can also win suddenly. Once they start making like 8/8s and 9/9s, you're full, and then you're at 0. So these, it is not, the existence of this deck means that something like Fatigue Warrior could never win.
Or it'd at least be a huge stretch. I think I one time lost to the Dead Man's Hand Warrior as Priest, but my Anduin was just really, really deep into my deck that game. I think for the most part, they're not favored there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're going to be able to pump out a lot of damage, and with a lot of the burst that's in the deck, potentially with like Velen, you might not. If you sequence correctly and they don't get up to like 200 armor or something absurd like that, then you could probably push through it anyway. But like most games you're going to push through it, but some you won't. But yeah, it's just but if you're not doing something ridiculous like that, you're probably not able to play a late game deck that can beat Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Yep, it's limiting sort of the playable decks in a way that like Jade Druid was doing it, and then they were like, well, maybe we can prevent that with Skulking Geist. While they printed Shadow Reaper Anduin, so they sort of solved the problem one place, but made it worse someplace else. Swallowed the spider to catch the fly. And Anduin is definitely the spider.
We might
the way the burst works from that deck is another really unpleasant thing about it. Like some decks, like Leroy Shadow Step with their daggers 13, or they Kelesteth and it's 14. Like you can there's a number, or like Fireball Hero Power 7, and like if I can get around this, like I can survive. There's like no number from that deck. Like every single card after they've played Anduin is suddenly like at least 2 damage. But is it a Holy
Yeah, yeah.
Smite? Is it a Blood Mace Thalnos? Is it a Circle Healing? Is it a Radiant Elemental? Is it Valen? Is it Mind Blast? There's like certain ways to like play around burst damage in the Dead Man's Hand deck. Like you can hang on to more shield blocks to get more copies of them or something like that. But you need to be able to estimate if you're going to get murdered next turn or not. And
Right.
the Anduin deck, Razakis specifically, just like there's no calculating that. Like once again, like missing some amount of uh, back and forth, some amount of interaction between players.
Yep, yeah, that's what's most sort of that's what's most unfortunate about it. And I think that's ultimately like part of the reason why it's so strong. It's not that
Yep.
you're playing a minion or a spell; it's that you're playing something that lasts until the end of the game, and you have no way of interacting with it. That's something we might expect to see in the next set. So, uh,
Mm.
not necessarily, but they did print like a card that hates on hero powers. Like the 5 mana like 2/5 or whatever. But
The
or
3 mana 2/5 Mindbreaker.
is it 3 mana 2/5?
The one from Frozen Throne, yeah.
Oh
He's like
wow, I thought that
surprisingly
was.
well statted.
Yeah, that's actually kind of insane. Wow, maybe I should make control decks with that card in it.
It might be worth
Um,
trying. I did play against a mage that was using it, which was really funny. And it's definitely tight in arena.
yep, yeah, sure. I mean that's good stat line. So we might see more cards that do stuff like that or that can interact in some way with the Death Knights.
Hmm.
But we shall see. Another card that I think is so all three of these cards are on my list, but another controversial card is Prince Kelesith. So the reason this adds win percentage to decks. It does so because some games you draw it in your opening hand and then you're heavily favored to win. And then the rest of the games it does absolutely nothing. Or it does very little because you draw it late. So that is, you're imposing deck building constraints on somebody, but they're rewarded because some fraction of their games are going to feel free. And people don't like playing against decks with free wins.
Hmm.
So it feels bad to lose to free wins. It feels okay to play free win decks, but uh, this is a huge free win card, and it's a free win card in like I don't know. You just put it in decks that are otherwise good. You make them slightly worse. Put this in there, and then you just recoup enough percentage because of the free wins you get. It's like you're taking away some of the wins you would have gotten from making decisions with just a bunch of balanced 2 mana cards, and you're getting it back plus some in games where you just didn't have to work very hard to win.
Yep. It's sort of like partly like a concession that like this is like a numbers game and I need to keep rolling the dice, and this is just I'm just playing odds. I'm not playing Hearthstone. And looking at it that way isn't fun, and when that's what you
Right.
experience, especially when your opponent's the one that high rolled you, like you said, it's not fun.
Yeah, I mean, this game can often feel like coin flipping or rolling dice, but if it was actually that, if you opened up the client, there was a coin, you flipped it, and then you got like the winning animation when it landed heads, like you would just never open this game. And so the more
Some
they
people
print
would.
cards that, I mean, you're right. But like the more you print cards that sort of push the game closer to that direction, the more you're sort of pulling back the curtain. This is definitely an odds game. How lucky you are in any game, whatever you draw, has a massive impact on the outcome of the game. Even the best players in the world have like sub 60 win percentages in tournaments at top level play,
Mhm.
or like parry 60, like around 60. Um, but the more so this is the chance matters a lot in this game, and cards like this just sort of like they highlight that, which I think is at times a strength, but it's also like it's like a strength that you don't want to brag too much about because a lot of people see it as a weakness.
Yeah, it's exactly like it's sort of about how you show it and how you
Yeah.
make people feel about it, and this one can feel bad. Though on the other hand, you can definitely beat somebody that plays Kaliseth. I definitely have. You can definitely
Oh, totally.
Kaliseth Shadow Step and lose. I think I've done that too. Um,
Yep, same here.
so that is sort of like proof that it probably is fair, even if it feels annoying. And it
Right.
feels like it's overpowered when you draw it. It is beatable just like any other Hearthstone card. In fact, sort of the argument that, or the explanation of how Kelesith works in that most of the time it's just in your deck doing nothing, but if you get it early, it's really good. I mean, that's Flame Imp. Like that's the way
Yep.
the card, same exact description is applicable to a lot of the aggressive one drops.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not, but Calceth feels way different, so that's part of it. But that can be good because you could be like, oh, my opponent turn one coin Calceth Shadow Step and I beat them, and that's something that I think could be fun about cards like Prince Calceth. Um, is that sure sometimes they get it early and it feels bad, but when you can beat it, it feels extra good.
Yeah,
So
for
it kind
sure.
of adds that dynamicness, dynamism, dynamic, but a noun to Hearthstone, and I think that's a really
Yeah.
fun thing about it, and the reason why it's, as long as it isn't actually unfair, is a good thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're ultimately right. Like, maybe it brings the win percentage up a little too high, but it doesn't. It's not the biggest problem in the set. It's not as big a problem as like Ultimate Infestation, I think.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
the amount of winning it contributes is definitely not comparable to UI or Anduin.
right. But it's certainly really strong. Yeah, overall.
But there's a
Uh,
no denying something about how it feels when they get
yeah,
it.
yeah, definitely. So, similarly, in as far as maybe potential whiffs, this is a deck that we talked about several times throughout the episode. It's the Big Priest deck.
Hmm.
With the Shadow Essence and Eternal Servitude. People don't like this deck.
Well, I mean, I love it, but I guess most people don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think people don't like priests in general, maybe. But that's how could you like Anduin? He's not very likable. Um, but yeah, Big Priest is like it's similar to Kelesith. It has exactly the same problem that Kelesith has, which is like you build your deck in such a way that some games it's really hard to lose. Some games are just like unbelievable. You're like, okay, coin, Barnes, you charge, and like they don't have an answer. The game's over. That's it. That game is done. Maybe you don't win immediately, but you're gonna win it in like 4 turns. And if they manage to answer those things, like you probably got far enough ahead that you're just gonna crush them. It doesn't feel very fun to play against that.
It can also be
But
that you're smashing them, and then they just get an obsidian statue, and then you're like, wow. Now they're going from like 3 to 18 for me to get through that, and I lose my entire board. And you're
yep.
just like, I
Yeah,
lost.
exactly.
They just played one card and I lost. I got them to
Yeah, and
3,
I
and
mean
now I
that
just lose.
that can feel really unfun. And like again, it's tough to hold. So this is a little different from Keleseth because this is not an individual card. This is a deck, and it's hard to hold Blizzard responsible for entire decks.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, some amount of it must have been obvious. They put Shadow Essence
totally.
and
And Eternal Servitude.
Obsidian Statue and Eternal Servitude all in the same um, set.
Yep.
Must have seen it coming, but
Yeah.
um, I guess I do think part of it is that ultimately the odds are mostly fair. It doesn't have like an 80% win rate or something like that.
Yeah.
It's about how it feels.
Yes. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
did they whiff? I think this is sort of like rather than a card that some people say 2 and other people say 10, it's like a deck strategy like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe a lot of people are saying 2, maybe too many people are saying 2. I don't know well enough. I'm sure they have a good idea of that. Um, and I think that would probably largely be an issue between Shadow Essence and Obsidian Statue. Obsidian Statue is just the most like punishing like nonsense off of that card or off of Barnes. You can beat
Yeah. Definitely.
Ysera and Lich King. A lot of the other things are beatable, but Obsidian Statue is just nonsensical swing with those. Um, but I mean, I really like doing that to people. I really like they get me to 3
It's
and they
evil.
think they're gonna win, and then I crush their dreams, and that makes me really happy. So that's definitely not a whiff from my perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, calling it a whiff is It's hard to call
and
though.
and
Like
it,
it's
it it stirs people up, and it has that 2 and 10 effect rather than being medium, and that's definitely something they got to do, something they're trying to do to make the game fun.
yeah. Again, like I think this like both Big Priest and all the controversial cards you mentioned, those are it's tough to call this whiffs because they are like they're not blatantly overpowered. You know, these cards, the controversial cards, and Big Priest is clearly not blatantly overpowered, but they're strong in ways that have sort of subjectively they could be very bad to be on the receiving end of them. They're sort of subjectively bad um, experiences, and in that sense, they're a little bit of a whiff in a game that's supposed to be all about fun. But
Hmm.
I think that they've definitely like maybe whiffed a little harder than just Big Priest and the controversial cards. There's things they did worse.
Yeah.
Like the both shaman and warrior got like nothing from the set. I mean, okay, Dead Man's Hand, which is another one of those like, oh, some people see it and they see like a 2, other people see it and they see a 10. It's one of those cards,
Hmm.
but other than that, all of Warrior's mechanics in the set were just not useful, not good.
Yeah, I mean, I still like Blood Razor, and it still seems like it's a good card, but it's just not good enough. And like
Yep.
every class is getting Bone Mare and Cobalt Scalebane, so getting medium cards isn't what you really need. Um, and it definitely didn't. Mori definitely didn't get Ultimate Infestation. Got Dead Man's Hand,
Yeah, and I mean
but like
like
Shaman and Warrior did get. Even Paladin didn't get that much.
yeah, that's I mean they got Righteous Protector though,
That's true.
which is like pretty
But
strong.
yeah, like I
And they
said,
got
those other two basically got nothing.
yeah, Shaman got like they got Thrall, and that's like a medium improvement to their evolve deck. It's not. It's just another evolve effect. It just makes them lean harder on evolve.
Yeah.
Um, and they I guess they got like Saronite Chain Gang. That's a neutral card, and Paladin got a bunch of neutral cards and Righteous Protector, but like Warrior got stone nothing. Warrior got killed. That's what they got. They lost Fire Roar X. This was not a good
They went
expansion for
negative.
Warrior. Yeah, they are not in the black. So it's that is a little unfortunate. The freezing synergy effects that they tried to give Shaman, like those looked terrible, and they just were.
They're awful.
They're just it's just bad because like it's anti-tempo. Like you don't the rewards you get for there's already anti-tempo cards in the game, and they all say like draw X cards on them. That's what the anti-tempo cards are doing. So if you're going to make an anti-tempo effect, it needs to do something more appealing than draw a card or draw 2 cards. Like you're not going to reward me with like more tempo later, because if I couldn't attack with my minion, I might have just lost like the cryostasis or whatever. Like I might have just lost tempo not being able to attack with my thing for a turn, or 2 turns potentially, and like all I'm getting out of it is like +3/+3. Like that's nothing. I'd rather just play a 3/3 and attack. So
Yeah, and I
it's
think that card is. Let me see here. That's an epic, like cryostasis.
yeah,
Like Druid
right,
was
right,
getting Ultimate Infestation, and
right.
then
Yeah,
here's Shaman getting cryostasis.
yeah, and Priest got Obsidian Statue. That's an epic, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's really unfortunate.
yeah. Totally forgot that they made those cards because they're so awful.
Yeah, they're horrible. Like Marabi, that card's miserable. If they just they didn't do very well. They kind of missed in that department. And same thing for Warrior. Like all of the whirlwind effects look really suspicious because they actually ask a lot of you. They're like, hey, can you like have a board and then make it worse and then you get something? And that's not that's already like
It's like, well,
okay,
cool. What
all
more do
right,
I get? A 2/2. Like,
right.
I'm gonna pass. I'd rather just like play a 2/2 or not. Not even maybe play 2/3. Like, what are you giving me a 2/2 for?
Right? Yeah, it's not. I'd rather just play pirates, or I'd rather play another class.
I had just completely forgotten those cards existed too.
Yeah, but that's that's
Like
what I mean
Rot
here.
Face. Like, yeah, that's a miss of a legendary.
Yeah, so they kind of missed in that for on those classes. I think like most of the other classes got something,
Mhm.
or ended up in a good place in Knights of the Frozen Throne. Like, did any of Rogue's class cards from Knights of the Frozen Throne end up seeing play? I don't think so, really.
I cannot think of any. They got Doomerang. they got a lot of, and that it's like Grape Shot, but for 6.
Yeah, no.
They kind of, but they just enjoy the neutral cards so much that they don't mind. There's
I
not a
guess they
single
got
rogue
like
complaining.
Yeah, I mean, Rogue ended up with like the format defining deck. I guess they got Plague Scientist and Shadowblade, both of which are like playable.
Yeah,
Um,
they're more arena cards.
yeah,
But they're good.
but I mean, like some classes really made it out like a bandit. I mean, Priest probably won the expansion in terms of playability.
It went from being a meme that the class was bad to being a meme that the class was unfairly good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Druid also kicks some ass too, right? Like Crippler, Druid of the Swarm, Spreading Plague, Malfurion, Ultimate Infestation. Those cards are all great, and that's like half of their class cards.
And even one of them got
That's
nerfed even.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of insane. Warlock also did pretty well, which was sort of pretty necessary.
Yes.
But yeah, I think so. I think it was okay overall. I did not think I liked Knights of the Frozen Throne as much as Ungoro, but I knew that would be those would be tough shoes to fill.
That was magical.
Yeah, Ungoro was a really amazing time for sort of just deck diversity reasons, and it had like sort of such a breadth of strategies. It was missing maybe some of like the top end controlling strategies that came around in Knights of the Frozen Throne, but other than that, it was like a really glorious time. Yeah, Frozen Throne was decent. I'm excited for change though, for sure.
Yeah, and like the fact that they did such a good job with this dungeon thing, castle, Ice Crown, gives me confidence that gives me constipation, gives me confidence that they're going to do a really good job with the kobolds and catacombs thing. And also, it's Blizzard doesn't just make card games; like they've made other games before. In case you didn't know,
really,
this is supposed to be they said roguelike, so this is sort of supposed to have elements of non-Hearthstone to it, and they're definitely gonna kill it with that, I'm sure.
I'm excited for that. I mean, like the AI has to be good, but if the AI is good, then it could be really fun. It could be challenging, and like I think that the Lich King AI is really good. So I could see them succeeding there.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's a good place to wrap up. How do you feel?
I feel great. I feel like a king.
All right, the Lich King.
Yes.
So if you want to feel like a king, you can find us on twitter.com/lastturnhs or facebook.com/lastturnhs. As always, you can find our podcast material on iTunes and Stitcher, SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/lastturn, or Google Play. You can also go over to our website for links to a lot of these sources. That's lastturnhs.com. We have a YouTube page where we upload our podcasts in video form, if that's your preferred format. We have just a number of other services where you can find us, like Player FM, Pocket Cast, Beyond Pod, or TuneIn. But yeah, I mean, thanks for joining us, and we hope that you guys felt similarly about Knights of the Frozen Throne as we did. We did like the expansion.
Yeah, let us know what your favorite cards were, and what you liked about Knights of the Frozen Throne or didn't like. And if you're excited for Kobolds and Catacombs, you can actually check out a spoiler for the set on our website, lastturnhs.com, as well.
That's true. We have a spoiler up there. Yeah, you can come check out the spoiler on lastturnhs.com and bookmark it, and then look at it a lot of times.
And yes, definitely do that. And we got links to like the many things that Bart just listed. You can get to all of them. They're all just right on our homepage, so that might even be easier.
Yeah, totally. It looks great. Go check it out. But yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time, folks.